Okay, well, I would like to thank all of you for doing this interview and hopping on to Zoom, doing this early morning for you guys, but it's kind of afternoon for me. But I guess I want to ask the first question, like, how did this all come about? And then for Pimm, like, why did you want to include your family rather than someone else's family? And then, like, sort of like the journey behind the origin of this film.
Well, I think it's important for Rayka, and she can jump in now or afterwards, to kind of tell about how they came to this, like as the desire to tell the story after period end of sentence and kind of that progression. So I don't know if you want to give that background first, Rayka, and then we can talk about how we met and all that stuff.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back a few years now to a project I did called Period End of Sentence. And Period End of Sentence was made in partnership with the PAD Project, which is a nonprofit organization that aims to sort of eradicate the inequities around menstruation around the world and educate people on feminine hygiene and so on and so forth. So the film sort of impacted a lot of people, and it really centered on sort of highlighting this stigma around menstruation, specifically in northern India, and how it was so shameful and taboo in this particular place in the world, and really just kind of like, was specifically set in northern India. But I think throughout the process of like releasing the film, and the film eventually went on Netflix, we started to realize that this is a very like widespread issue. It doesn't just exist in India, it's also in the United States. And I think out of that really came a desire to do the opposite and find stories about people and communities that were actually not shaming their girls when they first menstruated, but really were raising them to recognize their strength and really supporting young girls at this time in their life. And so we started just like looking into different Native tribes and how there are a lot of coming of age ceremonies. And specifically we found, I think, a blog post of Pimm's older daughter who had an ihuk ceremony. And I'll kind of let Pimm take over there and explain how that connection happened with her family.
Sure. So yeah, as Rayka shared, we brought the ihuk ceremony back about 26 years ago, I think now. And my older daughter had her ihuk, I don't know, 10 years ago. And as part of that, I had applied for a grant with Holly to do to relearn how to make one of the specific items, the maple bark skirt. And so we had done a master apprentice project funded by the Alliance for California Traditional Artists. So that's why we were online. So our project had been posted on their website. And so we got this message, and I know you're not supposed to answer messages from people you don't know on Facebook, but I did anyways. And I read Rayka's message, and it would just so happen that our second daughter was getting ready to have her ihuk that next year. And we talked about it with her, and we actually watched Period End of Sentence and talked about it and reached back to Rayka and had some conversations. And we just felt like, and we really, I say this and I mean it, even though she's here and listening and maybe thinks I'm saying it because she's here, but that's not why. We really took our lead from her. After watching Period End of Sentence, we sat down as a family and watched that. We really talked about how different that was from the experience that our young women were able to have because of this ceremony. And we talked about the importance of sharing that out and why it would be important to tell that kind of a story. And Ati was intrigued with the idea kind of too of sharing that, especially given she had said, even if it reaches just one person and changes their experience with this and helps to make, this experience better for young women, helps to bring awareness to all young people around menstruation, and that not being like, there's no shame in that, and helps to provide products to people or information to people, that she was interested. So, based on kind of a family discussion, we really met a number of times with Rayka and Sam originally, and just got to know them and learned about why they wanted to do it. And they learned about our story and kind of the bigger picture behind it. And we decided to go for it. And there definitely was a lot of time spent getting to know one another. And then when Shaandiin came on the project as well, we were excited about that, to have a young Native filmmaker as well as a woman of color filmmaker who had this big award behind her name as well. That was kind of exciting. You know, we had looked at that clip, done a little Google search of her and checked it out. And you know, just the idea of, you know, the kids are on social media so much, they understand the power of a story and how it can reach so many in so many corners of the world these days. And so we just, you know, thought, why not? We're already busy. We're already doing a lot of crazy stuff. Let's do this too. So, you know, and you always, right. And it's that old adage, but you ask busy people to do things because they say yes. And I think that's just the kind of family we are. So we just threw it on with everything else and thought, yeah, this could be fun. And we sort of have that role in our community as well. We are responsible for some of the other ceremonies. We hold regalia and we work with other families to make things happen. So we felt it was also kind of our responsibility to share this out in this way.
I know in my tradition, I'm Filipino, and then we have a similar ceremony for 18-year-old women who, you know, and it's called a debut. And then they have like sort of like a big celebration, and they have they have a dance, and there's a lot of food, a lot of music afterwards and stuff, and it's a big thing for the person, for the woman who's turning 18, and then sort of like her her entrance into the big world sort of thing. So I've always thought that such a beautiful tradition and ceremony, which is very similar to the ceremony you have in this film. So I'm just trying to figure out, was there parts of the film or parts of the ceremony that yours as part of this narrative that you had to really include to make it more impactful? Because I know that this type of ceremony was banished beforehand.
I mean, I think that, you know, in our community, we have had other ceremonies come back. And so we kind of knew how to do that. This was the first one that came back that was specifically focused on women. And I think, and families, which was different. I think that we're fortunate to live, I don't know if people realize, but geographically where we're at, we had contact very late. So we didn't have contact here until, you know, the 1850s, basically. And because it was so remote, it was sort of in and out in some ways. I mean, there was definitely impact. They left a lot of impact, and there's people here. But because of that, we were fortunate to still have people who remembered things from the ceremony, or we had first person narrative to learn from, even if it was written by the time we got to it. But we had, you know, we knew who these people were. So I don't think it was, I don't think I'm quite answering the question, but I think our community, because we had brought other ceremonies back, knew how to bring the ceremony back in a way that was meaningful, and it kind of was just a piece of the puzzle of who we were. I know I'm not answering the question. I don't know if I quite followed exactly what you were asking me. I'm looking at the written one too. Let's see. I mean, I think there's a deep responsibility when we bring it back. That's the part that I think they got in the film, to not just bring it back for our daughter, but to bring it back for the community, right? Because all the community doesn't have access to it. And so we're finding ways to bring it back so more people can access it. So in that way, yes, there's that responsibility piece. It would have been easy to do it for our daughter, but part of the reason we did the film, and part of the reason, like, we hold ceremony every year, and sometimes the family is like us, and there's a huge group of us who, you know, have the resources and the ability to kind of have it. Sometimes it's a young girl who comes from a family who might not have as much access to resources. And so we still come together to help have ceremonies for them as well, because there is a need to kind of build it up and make it more common again for other people to experience. But my family, fortunately, comes from one where we had been bringing ceremony back since the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And so we were sort of, you know, had the regalia, knew the site, had access to the songs, were around people who lived that same lifestyle, so could support that progress, or that work.
So this kind of a question is sort of pointed to Rayka. I know I was lucky enough to cover the film Pandora's Box by director Rebecca Snow, I believe last year, and it was a film that focused on menstrual equity. And I was even surprised at the treatment of menstruation throughout other countries such as India, and then even in jail cells where they couldn't even provide, just the basics for women who are experiencing menstruation in jail cells. And so I wanted to know how you wanted to sort of like help change that stigma about menstruation with this film, Long Line of Ladies.
I mean, I think everyone on the team was sort of behind that idea that, like, what Pimm's family had sort of, just been doing for most of their lives, like really inherently was a really powerful sort of model for like how we should be treating girls when they're first menstruating. And I think just going back to something I said earlier, there's like two ways that you could, I think, especially with films that are focused on social justice or sort of like trying to advance a cause or bring exposure to something or have a call to action.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have a film that is exposing something, right? Exposing an issue and bringing it to light. You can also have the opposite, which isn't exposing something rather, but is sort of empowering people, empowering people to not look at an issue, but rather like this is how we could be as a society.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it was sort of like along this journey, just several years of working on these types of films where they really are centered on women's issues and advancing women's rights and sort of eradicating the stigma around menstruation, that I think the realization sort of set in stone that like both types of films can have a great impact.
Right.
And I think, that's the really beautiful thing about this film is like, it's so positive. Like there's no conflict in the film.
Right.
And I actually like Shaandiin. I know you can touch on this too, because, from an Indigenous lens, like you have tons of stuff that, I don't know, you've worked on that are equally as important in their messaging. But I think one thing Shaandiin and I talked about a lot throughout our collaboration was, is it necessary to have a film that has conflict? What if our film doesn't have any conflict? Because that's just not what we're capturing. That's just not, what we're seeing in front of us. So Shaandiin, I don't know if you want to touch on that some more.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to be following a family that is so innately who they are, and like everything they do is so intertwined with each other. And I think that speaks to a lot of Indigenous peoples. It's not necessarily just like this one thing, like it's not about like just I guess uplifting Auti, for instance. It's about like the whole entire community coming together to create this whole really rounded picture that allows for stuff like this to flow. And I think it's really interesting to see like how a community creates like such an interesting environment that like naturally things progress in such an interesting and lovely way. And I think that speaks to who they are as a people and who they are in their community, that like everything that they're doing is amazing. I feel like it's not like we could have made a film about like the ihuk, or we could have made a film about like literally any other aspect of their life, because like everything that they're doing is just so incredible.
Now continuing with Shaandiin, we actually covered here on FERNTV like just a couple of weeks ago a film from director Nina Menkes, and her film was called Brainwash, Sex, Power, and Camera. And yeah, and kind of when I was watching the Q&A with the three of you, you talked about how you wanted to change that narrative of like the exploitation of women and sort of that narrative of just that concentration of exploitation in film. And so can you touch upon that, and then touch upon like how you want yourself to sort of like change that sort of ways of filmmaking, and how you want to, what kind of not strategy, but what do you want to do to change that narrative?
Yeah, I haven't seen that film yet, but I heard it's really interesting. It's like archival imagery of like how women have been framed throughout all of history in film. And I think that to me is like an incredibly interesting concept, because similarly, like Native people have been shot in ways that like weren't necessarily their choice, or used in like really ethnographic ways that are more built on logic and like picking things apart rather than necessarily understanding who they are. And I think it's subtle shifts in like everything. It's subtle shifts in the cinematography. It's like shifts in like the placement of like the music that's playing, like everything that is contributing to like this final image is like so important in how we see ourselves. And I speak for like ourselves because like I grew up like watching like Pocahontas or like other things that like made me kind of feel bad about myself, and it made me not want to be Native sometimes. And so I think it's incredibly important to see and like put these things out in the world that bring humanity and bring light to a situation that like we haven't seen before. And like I wish that I could have seen a film like this when I was a kid, because I think it would have changed the outcome to like my ceremony, which is like the Kinalta in Navajo. And I would have like actually done it instead of rejecting it. And so like I think like Ati has made an incredible choice to like allow us into their families' lives, because I think it changes perspectives on how we see ourselves and how other people see us as well.
Yeah, that's totally true. Yeah. So Pimm, now that your family's been in the film, like what are their thoughts on the film and being in it? And
Well, I think that everyone's pretty excited about it across the community. I will say that Ati said something funny. She stepped out for a second, but she said something funny about disassociation. She's like, I knew we were doing the film and I knew it was going to be out there, but I think I disassociated until like the teaser came out and she started seeing it posted places. Like then she realized kind of the impact of being in a film that gets shared out. But she's handled it really well in the sense that she believed in what Rayka and Shaandiin did. I think the last question you asked specifically, actually both last questions where you're talking about why they did it, and then the subtle differences in how they filmed it and how they chose to tell the story and how it does it differently, does such a good service to who we are as a people that we're all good with it. Like, I think all the discussion, like there was some really intense discussions between the filmmakers themselves and then between the filmmakers with our family as we thought about how to share something that we don't normally share, or when it's been shared in the past has been exploited in some ways. And so we really worked hard to figure out how to share it. And the best part of that story, I always think, is they sent us the first cut. And I don't know if they were we never talked about this yet. I don't know if they were anticipating us having like a lot of really critical feedback, but we had done so much work on the front end and getting to know each other and finding something that worked for all of us that we were just blown away by the first cut. We were kind of like, yeah, do your thing. We're good. We don't have much feedback, and I think that was a testament to us spending time getting to know one another, building a relationship, and making sure that we were all comfortable moving forward with the project. And so I think the whole family is really excited. I've been really moved by the young girl that actually had the very first ihuk 26 years ago, just got to see it not too long ago. And just the tears, where the whole time she just had all these tears. It's really, I've been most moved by the women who both had flower dances or ihuks and those who wish they had, but who felt differently because seeing what Ati got to do change who they were, even if they had one, or whether they had one or not, they were moved by that experience of the movie. And so in that way, I think that we're all excited about it. I mean, and I told this the other day we were in a different interview, but me and Rayka were talking, and we're excited too, because in 50 years, Native people will look back at this as part of their history and the progression and where they're at in 50 years. This will be a part of that story. So we're excited that it's captured in that way. It's important now, but it's going to continue to be important for tribal communities as we continue to grow these ceremonies, for them to see how far they've come. You know, like Ati's grandkids will be like, oh, grandma, you guys used to do it this way, or, you know, now everybody has them, or whatever it's going to be. I really like that it's part of that history too. So the impact now and the impact down the road, we're good with it. We're excited about it.
Nice. And from the Q&A, I believe Shaandiin said that you and Pimm were like, you're from different indigenous tribes. And so what was that like sort of like process like, because you guys were from different tribes, but you're both still indigenous, but what kind of like similarities or differences that you both embraced for this film?
I would say primarily similarities. I would say that, you know, there was kind of an instant connection between Shaandiin and the younger girls, which was really nice. She had that, you know, cool vibe too. Like when they were riding on the skateboard, she jumped on the skateboard too. So that they were able to make that kind of, you know, cousin kind of connection right away. And then as we shared stories about our families and about some of our experiences, although they weren't always the same, there's still a collective sharing of experiences across Native country. And so I think we were able to connect in those stories with one another. And in similar ways, we did that. You know, we talked with Rayka about, you know, some of where her family comes from and her experiences. And I think those were the things that made, you can feel that in the film, even if they weren't in there, you can feel the connections and the understanding about how our stories intertwined as just women of color in the world, because there's some similarities there that, you know, even if they're complete opposite experiences, they're related.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this question is for Rayka. I've interviewed a female Iranian director back at TIFF at 2019. Her name is Manaz Mohammadi, and she had a film named Sun Mother. And when she was given the interview, she was saying how much of a you know, an opportunity for her to have a movie and to talk about the treatment of women in Iran. And of course, it was dangerous for her to actually make such a film. And so how does it feel being an Iranian filmmaker to have this opportunity in, you know, not in Iran, but of course here in North America to make a film such as Long Line of Ladies, sorry.
I mean, I feel really fortunate to like live in a time and a place where, you know, these stories have a platform where there's an interest from people, from wider audiences, like even more commercial audiences, to be watching films like this. And I think it's a responsibility that I, as a filmmaker, don't take lightly. Mm-hmm. You know, I think every project you sort of have to ask yourself, because it takes so much time and energy, you kind of got to ask yourself, like, why are you doing this? And what is going to come of this? And it's not, you know, it's never like, oh, what's going to come of this is like awards or notoriety or whatever. It's always like important to sort of it's always just important to like make sure that there's going to be some sort of impact. And I just feel grateful and fortunate that I've had those sorts of resources and that type of support, that we could share stories like this, you know, because it's unfortunately not like that for a lot of people in other parts of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this question is for all of you. How does it feel to have your film at South by Southwest? And I guess we'll start with Shaandiin.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I've never been to South by Southwest before, but I've heard great things about it. And I've always had the idea that like they play films that are like more quirky and like, I guess, a little bit more out there. And so I'm really happy that they're kind of including different things in their lineup and kind of giving us a place and an audience. I think they'll be really excited to see it. And I hope we all get to go and be there together.
Excellent. Pimm?
Well, I think, I am only follow the kind of, I'm not an expert in any of this. So like, I know some of these film festivals and I don't know all of them. So, I'm just excited that it's getting some exposure. I have to Google every one that comes up. I mean, I knew what Sundance was, but other than that, I don't know all these. So I have to Google them and check them out. And so, I mean, it's exciting, like Shaandiin said, that it's getting into these different pockets, these different audiences will see them because it will impact people in different ways. And so the wider of an audience we can find, the better, because we don't know who it'll touch or who it'll impact or what it might inspire down the road. So it seems cool. I feel like we're hip with it being there just based on what I'm looking at online, but I don't know. I'm a mom and an auntie and a grandma, so I don't really know if it is, but I'm gonna think it is.
Rayka?
I think it's pretty hip to be there. I love South by. This is the third year with a film at South by, and unfortunately I've never had the opportunity to go physically in person because the first year was canceled because of COVID. But this year, just fingers crossed that we can all go and really have like a screening where we're all able to be there together in person and celebrate and feel the energy of the crowd, because that's like just the best feeling ever when you get to like stand and actually feel the energy of the room, and just like feel how it is really impacting people, and just to say that like this is just the beginning. It really is.
Yeah.
We hope that this film has a really long festival life and beyond that, and I think the goal is really like how getting as many people as we can to watch the film and as many opportunities to push this narrative, and have more people just watch Pimm's family be amazing and hopefully just learn from that, and their own version of it, their own thing,
Yeah.
So we're excited about that.